And is that Max? Good to see you, Max. There was a Simchat Beit HaShoev in the Beit HaMikdash. And it was a very festive time where there was great rejoicing in the Beit HaMikdash. The Mishnah is going to talk about the Hasidim, the Anshe Maisa, the great dancing, the torches. We're going to learn about it soon. And everybody came, the men came, the women came. They made bleachers for the women, special place for the women to sit, place for the men to be. And it was a great celebration. And I don't know, it's all right, because maybe people come, maybe they'll come in, they'll see. Chicago's wonder, okay. And there was also musical instruments that they played there's also musical instruments that they played at the Simchat Beit HaShoev. Welcome back. There's musical instruments that they played at the Simchat Beit HaShoev. Right? They had musical instruments. There was a whole amazing band that went on at the Simchat Beit HaShoev. And the Mishnah said that the music that they played, you cannot play the music on Shabbat. Meaning to say that every day they drew the water, and every day you have a celebration, but on Shabbat, Friday night, they cannot go ahead, even if they'll have a celebration, but they can't have a celebration with musical instruments. It's a question that they celebrated all Friday night or not, but they cannot play music Friday night on Shabbat. And also the Mishnah said, Yom Tov. The first day of the holiday is Yom Tov. You cannot go ahead and play the musical instruments on what? On Yom Tov. And what was the reason for these musical instruments? What was the reason why they played? Why did they play musical instruments when it was not Shabbat, when it was not Yom Tov? Because it says one reason is Shavtem Mayim Sason. You drew the water with happiness. That this mitzvah there was a mitzvah of pouring of water on the Mizbeach during every day of Sukkot to pour a certain amount of water on the Mizbeach, Mayim al Mizbeach. There's a special mitzvah for the holiday of Sukkot, as we explained, because on Sukkot we are judged for water. Ha'olam nidan al hamayim, it's a Rosh Hashanah lamayim. And maybe that's the reason why Hashem gave us a mitzvah that had to do with mayim, with water. So in the merit that we do this mitzvah with water, Hashem will give us a bracha, midah, keneged midah, with water. So that's the mitzvah every day. But you cannot play the musical instrument on Shabbat or Yom Tov. Then the Gemara said, yes, because in general, there's a halacha that we want to go ahead and we cannot play music on Shabbat. What's the concern? Why can't you play music on Shabbat? Why can't you play a piano or guitar? Because you might maybe a string will break, and you'll fix the string, and that will be a malacha. That will be a malacha, fixing a utensil. The flute also. The Mishnah mentions the flute. It emphasizes the flute because there's a discussion. Why is the flute mentioned in the Mishnah to describe all the musical instruments they refer to as the flute? No, to play. So the flute also is a musical instrument. Maybe something will break, you'll fix. Chalil. And therefore, the Chachamim, the rabbis, are here to protect. You want to send to the group that we're on? The rabbis are here to protect, and they made a gzeira. They made a fence, and they said, don't play music on Shabbat or on Yom Tov, because if something breaks, you might fix it, and then by fixing it, you'll be violating a 50b1. That was the Mishnah. Then the Gemara brought yesterday a Braita. What was the Braita? The Braita said the following. It brought down a machloket, a disagreement of two opinions, whether the Chalil is doche et Shabbat. Can you blow the flute on Shabbat? Or you can't blow the flute on Shabbat, meaning we're not talking about a regular Shabbat, but we're talking about some unique Shabbat. Okay, so very good. So the question is, what Shabbat are we talking about? Morning, Simon. It's see the thing with the Tana, the Tana, we got Shimon and Shimon, and we got the Tana. The Tana talk. The Tana talks short language. The Tana doesn't elaborate. The Gemara says Tana lishna klilanak. A lot of times they talk short. They did not identify what time of the year, what's a little bit details when it says Chalil dochet Shabbat, that we bring a machloket, we bring a dispute whether you could play the musical instruments on Shabbat. Now the Gemara brings that machloket, but there's two possibilities. There's the Shabbat of every week, every Shabbat in the Beit HaMikdash, and then there's a Shabbat of for Simchat Beit HaShoeva. There's two types of Shabbat that we could talk about. We could talk about the Shabbat of every week on Shabbat they brought a korban. So until now we've been talking about the music that they would play in honor of the Simchat Beit HaShoeva, in honor of the drawing of the water. There was music, but there's another time we had music. We had music every day in the Beit HaMikdash. If the Beit HaMikdash would be built today, tomorrow, there'll be music in the Beit HaMikdash. Ralph will be there. He'll be singing. The Levium will be singing, and there'll be music. And you got to make sure, Ralph, you keep your vocal cords. You got to practice those vocal cords. And you would have music in the Beit HaMikdash. So the music every day, the daily offering, the tamid in the morning that they brought the tamid in the morning, the daily korban in the morning, and in the afternoon the Levium would sing. Now, and not only would they sing, there would be musical instruments, a whole band going on, the Beit HaMikdash. And as we said, Rabbeinu Bachai says, why is this band? Why is it have to have? Why do we have a band in the Beit HaMikdash? Why all the music? Why all the singers? Because Torah has to be b'simcha. Avodat Hashem, you serve Hashem, has to be what? Simcha. With happiness. And therefore we know music, singing brings a lot of happiness. As we say, we're in the days of Sfirah. We don't play music now. We don't listen to music. Why not? Because it's days of mourning. It's days of mourning for the Talmidim, the students of Rabbi Akiva, the 24,000 students that died during this time period. So we don't play music. We don't listen to music during this time period. So music is something of simcha. A person during Avelut, person is in mourning, they don't listen to music. So there's music every day in the Beit HaMikdash. The question is on Shabbat in the Beit HaMikdash. Was there music on Shabbat in the Beit HaMikdash or not? We know that there were things that generally you can't do on a regular Shabbat in your privacy of your own home, but you could do in the Beit HaMikdash. For instance, slaughtering an animal. Slaughtering an animal on Shabbat. If I want to go ahead and slaughter an animal in my backyard, I have a chicken, I want to slaughter chicken, I can't do it on Shabbat. It's one of the Lametet Malachot. It's one of the 39 prohibitions of Shabbat, correct? Correct, Adam, I said Max, Adam. That's one of the 39 Malachot. But in the Beit HaMikdash, on Shabbat, they slaughtered the animal. For what purpose? For the what? For the Korban. The Korban Musaf, the Korban Tamid, they slaughtered the animal. What about, so we see that Avodah, that the service is Dochet Shabbat. It does override the Shabbat, just like giving a child a Brit Milah. The Torah says you can give a Brit Milah on Shabbat. Really, that will be a Malacha on Shabbat, making such a procedure. But the Torah tells us you can even do Brit Milah on Shabbat. So now the question, when we have this statement in the Braita that says a dispute on whether you could play instruments on Shabbat or not, one opinion says you could, and one opinion says you can't. What Shabbat are they talking about? What's the case? Is the case playing music for a korban? That's where they're, meaning 52 weeks a year, they're arguing whether you could play music, or they're not arguing about the korban. They're arguing about the Shabbat of the Simchat Beit HaShoeva, the Shabbat, playing music for the on Sukkot, on Shabbat, to accompany the rejoicing for this drawing of the water. So Reb Yosef says this machloket, this dispute that we found among the early rabbis on whether you could play music on Shabbat, and there was an opinion on record that says that you could play the music on Shabbat, he says that was only referring to the music to accompany the offering that we brought in the Beit HaMikdash on Shabbat. It's not about the Simchat Beit HaShoeva. Like our Mishnah stated, at Simchat Beit HaShoeva, the Mishnah did not bring any dispute. The Mishnah said that you cannot play music in honor of the Simchat Beit HaShoeva, in honor of the water drawing on Sukkot. The Mishnah didn't say two opinions. So Rabbi Yosef understands that no one's arguing on that. There's no person, no rabbi is going to say that you're allowed to go ahead and play music, at least in his opinion, or at least these two rabbis are not going to say, there's not going to be any opinion that says you can play music on Shabbat in the Beit HaMikdash in honor of this special water drawing ceremony. Rather, this dispute that we found, that there's an opinion that allows you to play music on Shabbat, that's, you know why? Because that's accompanying the offering, the korban that was brought, the offering that was brought, not the water on Shavuot, on Sukkot. And what's behind the machloket? And he said, what is the reason why each rabbi takes a position? I mean, when you take a position, there's a reason why you take this position over that position. What's compelling you? So he says the following. Very interesting. There's a mitzvah for Ralph to sing, to do shirah in the Beit HaMikdash. Song. It's one of the avodot, one of the jobs of the Levi. He's the gatekeeper, the Psichat Na'ali Sha'arim. He opens the gates, but he's also singing. And that's called an avodah. Singing is an avodah. It's a service. Now, in order to, is it called singing if you don't have music? Or without music, it's not even singing. It's not considered really singing. When the Torah says you have to have song for the Levium, what's included in the song? Is the purpose of the music? The music is that's how you fulfill the mitzvah of song. Without any instruments, it's not considered song. Or really, it's called song even if you have no instruments. Just a nice solo without instruments, it's called a song. The instruments are just to enhance, to magnify, to embellish, to make nicer, to make sweeter the voice of the singer, but it's still called a song without the music. It's still called singing without the music. So that is what ikashira bikli or ikashira bipet. Is the main singing with your mouth? That's how you accomplish the singing, and you can fulfill the mitzvah of singing with just your mouth without any instruments. Or ikashira is bikli. Is the main singing, you must have a utensil. And if you don't have a utensil, right, Simon, maybe it's not called your singing. It's not called shira. So if you hold that when the Torah commands the Levium to sing, that's the avodah. If you hold it has to be, singing is only accomplished with musical instruments, right? Just like, at a wedding, you hire a musician, called a musician. No matter, no one has at a wedding singers without a band. They understand that if you're going to have music, if you're going to have song, the song has to have a musical instrument. That's how we understand at a wedding. If you don't have the musical instrument, you didn't really, okay, you had to sing, but you're not going to, you'll say you really were lacking in the song. It's not like it just enhances. It's really part and parcel. It's the meat and the potatoes. It's the meat and the potatoes is having a what? Some music with the musician. But the other opinion so if you say that you need to have music in order to fulfill the mitzvah of singing, of song, so that could explain why the opinion is that says that you're allowed to go ahead and even on Shabbat, you could play music in the Beit HaMikdash, the Leviim, every Shabbat, according to that understanding, you could play music by the when this with the time that the Leviim have to sing, they can play music because music is an integral part of the mitzvah of singing. Even on Shabbat, because the same way other things override the Shabbat, you can slaughter animals on Shabbat in the Beit HaMikdash to accomplish the avodah. So you could go ahead and have the music going on Shabbat, accompanying the song of the Levium. The other opinion, the Rabbanan, according to Rav Yosef, they hold that song is accomplished with your mouth alone. You don't need the music to make it called a song. And therefore, since it's not an integral part, they hold it's not an integral part of the song, therefore you will not be able to play the music on Shabbat because you could accomplish, Ralph, the Levium could accomplish their job. They could do their job without the music. Sometimes, there's a job to be done. Sometimes there's a way to do the job in a nicer way. I could do it right time, you can do a better job. But sometimes you can do the job. You did the job. You did the job, but you didn't do it in, maybe you didn't do it in the most beautiful way, but you got the job done. So that's the question. Can the job be done without the musical instruments? So that and whether that's how Rabbi Yosef understood the argument between Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda and the Chachamim. That was his interpretation. What we had on record was the rabbi say you can't do the music on Shabbat. Yosef Yehuda says you can do the music on Shabbat. And his interpretation is they're discussing the music accompanying the Levium song. But they're not talking about the music by the Simchat Beit HaShoeva, which has nothing to do with the Levium. We're not talking about the music that was done by the water drawing ceremony. That nobody would say you're allowed to go on Shabbat because the Torah never told you need to go ahead and draw water with music at Simchat Beit HaShoeva. I never told you that. But in Levium, it said you got to have song, and if you hold, right, and if you hold it to instruments, therefore you could do it on Shabbat. But when it comes to Simchat Beit HaShoeva, there's no source, even though we did found a pasuk, Shavta Mayim B'Sason, you could draw water with happiness. You could do it without technically. There's other ways to accomplish, perhaps. Doesn't say, and even that, it's not a Torah, it's not a pasuk in the Torah that says you have to draw it with song. So that's what the Gemara says. Now, Amar Rabbi Yosef, with that backdrop, bring everybody up to date in the Gemara, we are now at 50b1 on the right column. Amar Rabbi Yosef, mina the Bahapligi. How do I know that this is, do I have any proof? The way I explained that I said that they're arguing in whether the main song is with the mouth or the main song is with utensils. Where did I find such a precedent? Where did I find this idea that there's such an argument? So he says, I have the Tanya. I have another Breita. I have a Breita. What's the Breita? It says the following: Kli sharei she'ason shel eitz. The utensils that you use in the Beit HaMikdash, whether it's let's say the pans that you use in the Beit HaMikdash, or maybe whatever you're using in the Beit HaMikdash, to serve in the Beit HaMikdash, can it be made out of wood, or it has to be made out of metals? Because we're going to see that the menorah is going to be able to be made out of, even though the Torah says you make the menorah out of gold, zahav, but you can make it out of other metals. But we're going to see, what about wood? Would you be able to make a menorah out of wood? If, let's say, even though it's ideal to make the menorah out of gold, but let's say it's hard for you to make it out of gold for whatever situation. Let's say that financially, you're building the Beit HaMikdash, and you don't have the money to make it out of gold. Is there, and you're figuring out your allotment of money, could you go ahead and make it out of wood? You can make it out of, we're going to see, you can make it out of other metals, but you might not be able to make it out of what? Of wood. So that is the question. What regarding the different things that you use in the Beit HaMikdash, what material is allowed is to be made out? So we have, it says the following: Kli sharet she'asal shal'et. If you made it out of wood, you made this material out of wood, Rabbi Posel, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda Mashir. So there's an argument whether it is valid, or if you made it out of wood, you got to remake it. You got to put it to the side and make it redo it out of some other metal. Now, so that's the question. If you have a utensil in the Beit HaMikdash that's serving in the Beit HaMikdash, does it have to be specifically out of metal, or can it be made out of wood? So we have a dispute. Now, made out of metal, but the question: what about if you made out of wood? Eights, would it be good? So that's the machloket. So if you made out of some other material called wood, wooden material, there's a dispute. Now, what is behind the dispute? Why are they arguing in whether you can make the utensils in the Beit HaMikdash out of wood or not? What's the argument? So the Gemara says, my love, most probably they have the same dispute that we had before. What are they arguing on? Man de Machshir, the one that says you can make it out of wood, he holds Sava Ika Shira Bikli. It's only called song if you have instruments. And therefore, since he holds that, you need to have instruments. Now we know that in the Mishkan, when they built the Mishkan in the days of Moshe, the Khalil, there was a flute that they used, that the Levium used to sing song, and that flute was made out of wood. The flute of Moshe was made out of wood, and the fact that it was made out of wood, and since it was made out of wood, so it shows you that you can make, and it was used in service in the Beit HaMikdash. What service was it used? To play music for the song. And since the opinion that says you could use wood in general, because he's going to say, we have a precedent. We saw Moshe Rabbeinu in the Mishkan, his flute that they used was made out of wood. So too, you could use other servicing utensils can be made out of wood. Now, that only could be a source of proof if you needed to use the musical instrument. If you did not need the musical instrument, if you did not need the flute, so you can't prove that you could use an instrument that you do need from an instrument that you don't need. If the point of the instrument was just to enhance with an extra, so the fact that it was made out of wood doesn't show when you have something that's not an extra that can be made out of wood. But if you hold it's a vital point that you must have music accompanying instruments accompanying the song, That means the music is vital for the song, and therefore it's considered a ministering utensil, and yet it was made out of wood, so we could use that as a precedent that any any utensils that you need to use in the Beit HaMikdash could be made out of wood. And therefore you would be able to even play the instrument on Shabbat. Exactly. Because it's an integral part of the service, the song. But if you hold Mad Pasil, the one that says that you cannot use utensils made out of wood, because he says you can't prove from Moshe the fact that they use a wooden flute, but they didn't need the wooden flute. They didn't need the flute at all. So the fact that they used wooden because it's an extra. We never found something that was needed that was made out of wood. And therefore, if we didn't find anything that's needed made out of wood, you can't use a utensil made out of wood. So the main song is with the mouth, and you can't learn out from the flute of Moshe. So the Gemara wants to show, good morning. So the Gemara wants to show that we found an argument regarding some other matter, and it seems that argument is dependent on the same issue that Rabbi Yosef brought up. That's what he's proving from there. That they're arguing in what is the meat and potatoes of the singing of the Levium. Is the meat and potatoes with the music? Is the music an integral part of the singing of the song? Or is the music not a necessity for the singing of the Levium? And therefore, if that's the issue, then we can explain why the rabbis argue whether on Shabbat, whether we'll override the Shabbat in the Beit HaMikdash for the Levium, will they allow the music to be played on Shabbat. It depends if the music is an integral part of the song or not an integral part of the song. And then the Gemara says, lo, no proof. You want to say, Rabbi Yosef wants to say he found his proof. The Gemara said it is no proof. We are on 50b2, on the bottom column, on the bottom of the first column. Lo, it is no proof. Why is there no proof? It's possible, the Gemara says, the Kulei Alma that everybody holds, Ikashira Bikli. Everybody holds that the main song is with a utensil. Good morning, Jaime.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning. We are on 50b2 on the bottom of the first column. And the issue here, the Gemara brought up, is when the Levium, when the Levies, right? Levies are the Levium, as we all know, like the Cohens are the Kohanim. In general, Levi is Levium. When they have a mitzvah to sing in the Beit HaMikdash. And the Gemara is discussing, can they play music in the Beit HaMikdash? Can they play music in the Beit HaMikdash on Shabbat to accompany the song of the Levium? That is the question. And the Gemara wanted to say, there was a rabbi that wanted to prove and say that it's depending, this question is depending if singing, do you need to have music in order for it to be called singing? Is music an integral part of the singing, or music is not an integral part of the singing? And if you hold music as an integral part of the singing, then you're allowed to do it on Shabbat, because even though the rabbis forbade playing music on Shabbat, but here, because it's an honor, if it's necessary for the service in the Beit HaMikdash, you're allowed to go ahead and do it on Shabbat. But if the singing, good morning, Dr. Neb, but if the singing is not necessary, if the music is not something that is a must, when the Torah says play music, when the Torah says for the Leviim to sing in the Beit HaMikdash every day at the bringing of the Korban, is part of that obligation to have, do they have to have music with the singing, or could it be accomplished without the music? That is the question. Do you hear the question? Do you have to have, what, do you fulfill the mitzvah with, let's say all the musicians are calling in sick. Don't feel they can come today. Do the Levium still sing? Do they get the mitzvah if the Levium sing? Well, there's no mitzvah of singing if you have no music. There's no mitzvah. It's not called song if you have no music. That's the question of the Gemara. So there was a rabbi. That's how one rabbi presented the issue. One rabbi, what did you say? Yeah, so that I would think everybody understands you would have to have some thinking. That's what I would understand. The question here is whether you need to have, meaning just have music without singing. I don't think that would be a possibility that's called singing. Okay, but does it sing? But you need the singing, but does it also have? Is there two parts to the singing, right? So that's how one rabbi expressed his understanding of a dispute. Right. So that's the discussion. Also related to music. We don't play music, so clapping on Shabbat is there are those that don't clap on Shabbat because of that as well, because related to music. There are some people that clap in a non-usual fashion. They'll clap like this instead of clapping like this on Shabbat, just to now, because if it's not the normal clapping, they won't come to.
Rabbi, isn't there a kal vachomer here that if you're not allowed to build the Mishkan on Shabbat, why would you be allowed to do any other melacha on Shabbat for kavod of the Beit HaMikdash?
Very good, because there's a difference between building. Jaimi's pointing out that building the Mishkan. The Torah says, you know how special Shabbat is. You can't even build the Mishkan. You can't build the Beit HaMikdash on Shabbat. But that's because the building is preparing for the temple. You're preparing the mitzvah. But the actual service in the Beit HaMikdash, the service actually override the Shabbat. They slaughtered animals in the Beit HaMikdash on Shabbat. So the building, when you're building something, when you're building the building, that's the preparation for the service that did not override the Shabbat. But the actual service in the Beit HaMikdash, actual serving, slaughtering the animal, bringing the karban, the offering did override the Shabbat.
But how is the slaughter allowed? And then we derive from within our melachot that we can't kill an animal on Shabbat.
Right. What we derive on Shabbat. Morning, boss. Good to see you. What we derive on Shabbat is the Torah connects Shabbat to the Mishkan. So we learn from there, and the Torah says, don't do malacha. The Torah says, lo sa'aseh malacha on Shabbat. And then right after the Torah tells us, don't do work on Shabbat, it speaks about the work of the Mishkan. It speaks about the building of the Mishkan. So the juxtaposition, if that's the right word, by the Torah connecting the those who work on Shabbat and then talks about the Mishkan. So we learn out that the work that we're not allowed to do on Shabbat is the work that they did in the Mishkan. Things that they did in the Mishkan. They slaughtered animals in the Mishkan. They baked in the Mishkan. They did lechem apanim. Whatever they did, different things in the Mishkan, things that were needed. They dyed the animal skins, the different things that were done. We learn out. So that's the thing that we learn out to identify what's called the malacha. But once you build the Mishkan, the Torah teaches us that the certain things that you could do, the service in the Mishkan itself is able to go ahead and override the Shabbat. So the connection of Shabbat and the Mishkan only teaches us to clarify, when I tell you don't do malacha on Shabbat, the individual, when we're talking about the individual shouldn't do malacha. Difference between the individual and service in the Beit HaMikdash for the community. The individual cannot slaughter his animal on Shabbat. But the community has a mitzvah to bring a korban on Shabbat. It just shows us, in a certain sense, how important the korbanot are. How it keeps the world going. Al shloshet dvarim ha'olam omeid ala Torah, ala avodah, al gmil chasadim. So what we all know what Torah is. We all know what gmil chasadim is. What is avodah that keeps the world going? The avodah is the service in the Beit HaMikdash, and that's one interpretation. And when we don't have the Beit HaMikdash, our prayers is what keeps the world going. Avodah, we have the pasuk says, "Ulavdo b'chol levavchem," to serve Hashem with all your heart. What's called? How do you serve with your heart? What's called an avodah shebelev? How do you serve with your heart? You know what the Gemara says? Zut tefillah. Prayer is called an avodah. It's a job to get your heart into it, to put focus. One of the hardest mitzvot is to put focus and kavanah. But it's called avodah. Of course, you have to say the words. See, it's interesting. Like, if you go ahead and you pray without saying anything, you didn't pray. But what's the battery of the prayer? Is the battery is your intent. If you have to have the heart. You pray. What do they say? Tfilah below kavanah. Praying without intention is like a goof, a body without a neshama. That's a statement that people say. If you pray without your heart, it's like a body without neshama. Meaning your heart is really like the neshama. You got to put your heart into it. So that's called an avodah. So we do see that things are allowed to be done on Shabbat in the Beit HaMikdash, just like we find Brit Milah. Brit Milah, doing the action of a Brit, is would be to do a Brit. If a guy would do a wound to somebody on Shabbat, that's a violation of Shabbat, right, Boaz? But yet, nevertheless, the Torah says you can even do a Brit on Shabbat. And that also shows you, it identifies to you the power, the importance of a circumcision, that the Torah says that you can even do the circumcision of the mitzvah circumcision, even on Shabbat, just to get an appreciation of what a circumcision, of how powerful, how important a circumcision is. Now, and you can understand, there's a beautiful idea. Just when you go to a Brit Milah, when you go to a circumcision, a lot of people don't realize what's really happening. Because a Brit Milah, circumcision, means you're saying, I'm entering the covenant of Abraham. I'm a certain life, to lead a certain life. It's not about a circumcision. It's not just, okay, we cut the foreskin. We do that. That's the whole idea. We just cut the foreskin, and we got rid of that extra piece that Hashem placed on the person. The circumcision represents you're part of this club, so to speak. You're part of this Jewish people and one of the rules and regulations that were accepted, that this child is going to be brought up with certain rules and regulations following in the ways of Avraham Avinu. It's called the Brit Shel Avraham Avinu. So I said the irony is that we have, thank God, a lot of secular Jews do Brit Milah. Thank God, it's one of those mitzvot that a lot of not religious Jews do. They do Brit Milah, but they don't understand, they don't realize what the Brit Milah really represents. Brit Milah means I'm going to keep Torah and mitzvot. That's what it's all about. I'm part of Avraham, that Hashem gave to Avraham, that I'm going to be. Avraham's going to live a certain life, and that's the sign that you're doing, that you're being part of that. I want to wish everyone a beautiful day. We'll be back tomorrow, and I want to say next week I'm going to be going to Israel to recruit. To meet the Americans that are college that are going to Israel for the gap year, coming back to college campuses, and I'm going to talk to them about learning opportunities. I'm going to have Rav Moshe Feinstein's, someone who married Rav Moshe Feinstein's great-granddaughter from the yeshiva is going to cover, because the Torah has to go on, learning has to go on. So there will be learning here for sure, Tuesday through Friday. If people will be here Monday, he will come Monday on Memorial Day also. So you got to just tell me if people are going to be here Monday, he will come Monday. Thank you very much. And so I want to Thank you
Thank-
all. So be back tomorrow, Friday. Looking forward. Welcome back.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you very much. Thank you.